Okay, and then I'll share my screen. Good morning, everybody. 10 o'clock. Let me scroll over to Jitsi and do a screen share. Does everyone see the slides?
We're good here on Jitsi. It's just a few seconds delay on YouTube.
Okay.
I'm not seeing them on Jitsi yet either.
Yep, they just popped up. And they're on YouTube now.
Okay, great. Can you see them yet, Marissa?
I see them on YouTube, not on Jitsi, so that's fine.
Okay, just shake your phone really hard.
Oh my gosh.
Okay, awesome.
You just tell me when you want me to switch slides and I'll make it happen.
Okay,
awesome. I'll just open it really quick.
Be going by the delay on the YouTube then because I can't see them on my Jitsi.
Okay.
Okay. So good morning, everybody. I'm Sergeant Catanella. I work in the training office. Today's continuation training, we originally had planned to have it flight attendant techniques and procedures, but a lot of the procedures you can find in the flight attendant training guide dated 2019. So this continuation training is mostly just going to be about techniques. And keep in mind that these are not all encompassing techniques. These are just a few things that I was able to put together with some stuff that I could think of, as well as input from a few of the other flight attendants. We do have some flight attendants who can speak up whenever they would like to. And if you want to share any other techniques that you may have or ideas, go ahead and you can put them in the YouTube comment section. So we will get started. The first slide is mission prepping techniques. So why would you want to prep ahead of time? The biggest reason, in my opinion, is it saves a lot of time on the jet. But also keep in mind that if the food will taste better fresh, then just make it fresh on the jet instead. One of the biggest reasons for prepping in the kitchen is you may have very limited time when you're actually on the jet. So the first leg out of home station is always the busiest. That's when you're loading all of your fleet. Fleet may be late. The party may be early, all different things like that. So if there's anything you can get done for the first leg, go ahead and prep that ahead of time as long as it won't interfere with the taste or presentation of what you're serving. So things to consider when prepping food in the kitchen: how cooked is it? Did your burgers get completely cooked, or were they only done with grill marks? Were your steaks only seared, or were your steaks cooked medium rare, or are they still rare? So keep those things in mind so that way you know how to finish preparing them on the aircraft. How does it look? Remember that the plate is a reflection of your efforts as the cook and the first, and basically you as the entire flight attendant crew. So even if you didn't prep it, don't be afraid to check what's going on in the kitchen as things are being prepared ahead of time. If you had a specific vision in mind and you relayed that and you notice that it's not being prepared that way, don't be afraid to speak up and say something about it. And then also consider, how was it cooked? Was the food baked, fried, sauteed? Different things like that, as far as what kind of oil was used, how much oil was used, whether it was butter instead of oil, can affect how your food tastes and looks and how it kind of holds when you're storing it overnight for multiple nights. I'll share an example. I watched eggs being cooked, and there was like an inch of vegetable oil in the pan over the eggs. That's pretty gross. So just make sure you keep an eye on how things are being prepared in the kitchen as well. And so that way you can kind of step in and say you prefer it another way, or that way you're aware of what it's going to look like when you get to the aircraft and you pull it out to prepare it. Go to the next one.
Yeah, I'm trying to anticipate when you want me to go so I can click it early, since you can only see it on the YouTube.
Oh, sorry. Okay, so now that we talked a little bit about why we would prep for a mission, we'll go over a couple food storage procedures. So one of the biggest things that we do ahead of time is souffle condiments. And why do we souffle condiments? It can be very time consuming on the jet, especially if you have more than one or two. So say you're doing mayo, mustard, and ketchup for whatever reason. That can take a lot of time, and it also takes up a lot of space. So if you can prep it ahead of time in the kitchen, go for it. When storing it, I do highly suggest putting it in a pan as opposed to a Ziploc. With the Ziploc, it's bound to get jumbled up. It kind of looks It doesn't look very appealing because it gets all over the lid and all over the sides. And you're also likely to lose some because the lids will come off and it'll spill all over the bag. So if you are going to souffle ahead of time, I do suggest having it in a pan. And if, say it's for your second leg, which is like the second or third day of your trip and you decided to souffle it, make sure that you have it packed in a cooler so that way it doesn't get smashed or jumbled up. And next thing is sour cream. I see a lot of sour cream prepped in the kitchen, whether it be for like taco salads or quesadillas or anything like that. So a lot of people do prefer to get the squeeze bottle sour creams, and I know that that is very convenient on the aircraft. But you can also get just the tubs of sour cream and scrape it into a Ziploc bag. So if you don't want to store 10 different squeezable tubes of sour cream, you can get the tubs, put them into Ziploc bags, and then double Ziploc it. And then you can also store it in your cooler in a flat layer. So that way it doesn't take up as much space as the plastic containers would. And you also don't have to open up a bunch of different squeeze tubes. And I know me personally, I do prefer to use the tubs and scrape it into a Ziploc and squeeze it that way. Just because sometimes my grip isn't very good and I have like joint pain and everything. So squeezing those sour cream tubes and trying to get every last bit out is difficult for me sometimes, whereas I find the Ziploc a bit easier to do. And that kind of goes the same for Greek yogurt. I like to get the tubs of Greek yogurt and then I will also Ziploc it. So sometimes Greek yogurt containers will say use within 7 days, use within 10 days, and sometimes they don't have a date on it. I personally do like to date the bag. And then I also write how many servings I can get out of it, because sometimes you may be able to fit more than one tub in it into the Ziploc bag. So that kind of helps gauge how many parfait cups you need to be getting from each Ziploc bag. And that also goes back into the cooler packing ideas, how I kind of mentioned if you don't want to store all of the squeeze sour cream containers and you wanted to Ziploc it instead, you can always try to just make things as flat as possible in the cooler. And some other techniques for packing the coolers are you can put ice packs in the bottom of it. You can also do wet ice. As just a personal preference and technique for me, I don't like using wet ice. Like loose wet ice, of course, in the ice bag, I like to use that, but I would rather put ice packs in the bottom of the cooler if I'm going to do that. Make sure that if you do go that route, you don't put the produce directly on the bottom layer because the ice will burn it. I also like to layer and fill the cooler in groupings based on meals or days. So I'll have the left side of my cooler this specific meal, the center this one, and then the right side another meal, or I'll stack it based on meals. So you can kind of organize your cooler based on how you're going to, and always organize your cooler based on how you're going to pull things out of it. Always put the heavier things on the bottom so they don't crush other items. And then try to store items flat. So instead of filling up a Ziploc bag really full so that it's kind of rounded, fill it less and then just do a couple of them. That way everything lays a little bit nicer in the cooler. And if you have produce near the top of the cooler, you can lay down some dish towels on top of the trash bag or on top of the actual produce itself and then fold the trash bag over it. And then that prevents the ice from the ice bags being directly on the produce. And does anyone in here have any tips they want to add so far about anything that we've covered with this stuff?
Nope. For the ice on the bottom of the cooler, like if you do still continue to use wet ice, just know obviously that's going to melt and already create a waterlog. So you'll have to check your cooler a lot more frequently to make sure that you drain that out.
I'm unable to check the YouTube comments while I'm doing this stream. So if anybody
I got you.
Okay, awesome. Thanks.
Yes, that's a very good point. And a good rule of thumb that I go by is I just check the cooler after every leg. Of course, if it's only like an hour and a half leg or something like that, I'm not going to check it unless we have a lot of ground time. But just I'm always weary of things getting waterlogged. So I'll check it after every leg, time dependent, of course. And then the next thing we'll go into is talking about how to store food to put into the cooler. So double bagging is going to be the biggest thing. We currently don't have the 2-gallon Ziplocs, but we've been following up with APS, and so we should be able to get them soon. And I prefer the 2-gallon Ziplocs over the ice bags just because they seal better. But when putting anything into a cooler to store, always bag your items and then always double bag your items. Even if it's just one overnight trip, the one time you think your cucumber's not going to get waterlogged, it's going to be waterlogged. So what items should you bag? Basically anything. Even if I get those containers of I think it's the feta cheese that comes in the plastic containers and then has the plastic seal on it. It may be overkill, but I also Ziploc those just to be safe, because you never know if the seal inside of it is going to break, or if something is going to puncture the plastic and then the bag is punctured, and then that plastic container is punctured and then water leaks into it somehow. So as long as it doesn't interfere with how I'm stacking things into the cooler, like the game of Tetris, then I am going to bag everything, even if it has a hard surface. One thing for produce, if I have lettuce or something, I put a dry paper towel in there. And then if I have tomatoes that I'm storing, I will also wrap those individually in paper towels. And then that way they're still kind of covered in the bag, but that's just my technique. And if you're unable to fill items into a Ziploc, then use the ice bags. So anytime you're bagging stuff, whether it be ice bags or Ziplocs, always alternate it. So close it on one end and then put that closed end into the bottom of the other bag, and then tie that into the other bag. One tip that Sergeant Rice shared with me that she figured out, because the ice bags have that hole in it, and a lot of times water will leak into it, even if you have it double bagged, she tapes the end of the outer ice bag. And that prevents ice from getting into that first hole, and then that second, or water getting in that first hole and that second hole of the ice bag.
Nice. That's a good one.
And then another thing, always check your bagged produce. So even if you check your cooler and you see that there's a big puddle of water in the bottom, don't just take your bag out, drain the cooler, and then put your trash bag back in and assume that everything in there is fine. Sometimes, even if you can't find a hole, there could be water pooled up inside of that trash bag. So make sure you're always checking your produce as needed. And then next technique is ice bags. So this kind of goes into the ice drawers and also using them in the cooler. I'm a huge advocate of bagging ice ahead of time. And this is because it saves time in the morning of show. And also, I don't fully rely on APS to bring me the ice. It may possibly be melted. They may have the bags overfilled. They may not be filled full enough. Or they might just be late. And then so by the time they get there with the ice bags, then we still have to put them on the cooler. And it could probably be melted by the time we get out to the jet. Also, coming from Hickam in Hawaii, the APS there did not have actual ice bags. So they would, anytime we did request ice for whatever reason, they would bring it to us in trash bags. And it's a huge pain in the butt to transfer it from a trash bag to an actual ice bag. And playing into that, I also suggest always having ice bags with you on the jet, because you may land somewhere and they provide it to you in like a styrofoam cooler or a trash bag. And so you have to find a way to get it into an ice bag. And so when you pre-bag ice, always lay it horizontally rather than storing it vertically. When it's vertical, it kind of just, how I talked about the Ziploc bags, it makes it rounded, which is more difficult to put into the cooler and takes up more space. And then also only fill it about 3/4 of the way full. That will allow the ice to spread in the bag when you lay it. And then the second picture on the right side, you can see it's only a slight difference, like maybe not even an inch, but that difference in the height of the ice bags can be whether or not your cooler closes all the way. And I personally like to have my cooler closed completely to lock in all of the coldness.
And one comment on YouTube really quick from Sergeant Tremakis. If you do get ice on the road and it's from a non-potable water country, she's used that ice before for storing cooler food only in an emergency, but put that ice in extra bags so that it doesn't spread like throughout the rest of the cooler.
That's a really good point. And then putting it into the trash bags also kind of differentiates it, so that way you don't get confused what is your potable ice and what's your not potable ice. Thanks for that. Okay, and then this is a very, very simple technique, but it can really make all the difference. So when tying your ice bag, you can either tie it in a knot or you can tie it in a bow. pros with tying it in a knot, the strings are 100% secured, so they're not going to untie. And then a con to that is if it's tied tight enough or you don't have like the fingernails to untie it, then you'll have to tear a hole into the bag in order to scoop the ice out for your drinks. So I prefer a bow. A bow is easy to untie and it helps for scooping ice out for drinks, easy to just tip over and drain. And then reusing the bag, you can reuse the bag to combine half full bags of ice, and then reuse the bag if getting ice from a different location that doesn't have ice bags and you don't have any ice bags on the jet. So one of the things I do is I try to conserve my ice for the coolers. So if I see that I have like 3 half empty bags, I'll drain all the water from them and then I'll combine them into that one bag until I have a full bag. So that's why I like reusing my ice bags and why I like to tie it in a bow, so that way I don't have to tear the hole into it. But it's a very simple technique. A con to tying the strings in a bow might be that they untie on their own, but I have never seen that happen.
No, just make sure, like, if you're picking it up, that you grab, in between the strings, because I've seen it, where you grab one part of it and then it automatically unties it. But yeah, if you know that you tied it in a bow, just grab it a certain way so that you're not untying it when you pick it up.
Yep. And I never grab ice bags by the strings. I always just pick it up like it's a sack of potatoes.
Or a baby.
Or that. Okay, so next one, this is just a shopping tip, and I thought this was very important to put in here. And Senior Master Sergeant Bush has a way better way of explaining this than I could, because she understands how to explain it better than I do. But I did want to put it in here because it's something that I see very, very often that has a huge impact on over shopping. But if you look at something such as a salad dressing or drinks, the bottle size says 15 fluid ounces. And then a bottle serving is, for our dressing, this particular dressing is 15 servings, which equals 2 tablespoons per. And then when we shop, we base it on filling a 2-ounce souffle to serve them for their salad. So 2 fluid ounces is equal to 4 tablespoons. So if you're factoring the 2-ounce serving size that's written on the bottle, you're basically giving someone 4 tablespoons. And me personally, that's 240 calories of salad dressing. And I need to watch my figure. So I'm not a huge fan of that. So portion sizes, as far as that goes, just the health fact, pay attention to that, because 2 fluid ounces is different than 2 regular ounces. And so I filled 2-ounce souffles with that salad dressing to see exactly how many containers I could get from it. And these were about 3/4 of a way to almost completely full. And I was only able to get 12 2-ounce souffles from that one bottle, which means for 3/4 of a way full, that is more than 2 tablespoons per in each container. So when you're shopping for your dressings or condiments, because this goes for everything, whether you're doing a 1-ounce souffle or a 2-ounce souffle, I always do half of that. So if I need 2 ounces of dressing for a salad, I'm only going to shop for, or factor in the math, for 1.5 ounces per person. If I need 1 ounce of mayonnaise, I'm only going to shop for 0.5 ounces of that. Just because that equates to not as over shopping, and you're not filling a 1 ounce or a 2 ounce as full as completely full. And then same goes for the 9 12-ounce cups for drinks. Orange juice is one thing that typically always gets over shopped for. So we use the 9-ounce cups for that. I shop for 5, maybe 6 ounces of orange juice, and it's the same thing. I never really fill it slightly more than halfway full, and sometimes still have extra orange juice in that situation. Is anybody on here that has more tips with shopping for liquids like that? No? Okay, so next thing is prepping techniques. We do a lot of eggs on the jet. And sometimes I got on the jet once and we were doing scrambled eggs, and we had another crew prep for us. And I thought that the eggs, because the eggs were already bagged, I thought they were going to be pre-mixed, and they weren't. They were still the yolks, like how in the first picture. And so I had to whisk them, and me not really using common sense or thinking, I tried to whisk them in the bag and then spilt it everywhere because I didn't want to scratch up the bean pot by whisking them in the bean pot. So some prepping techniques for eggs are you can very well just crack all of your eggs into a Ziploc and seal it up and use them that way, and then you can whisk it on the jet. Or you can crack them all into a KitchenAid or a bowl. I prefer to use a KitchenAid so that way I don't have to do any of the whisking. And when you do use the KitchenAid and pre-mix them, you can add your milk or cream or whatever it is you're adding to them during that time. And then you just double Ziploc it. So why do I like to mix them ahead of time? Because I don't have to mix them in the bean pot. I don't have to mix them in the Ziploc bag. I just pour the pre-mixed eggs into the heated bean pot, season, and then cook them. And then also pre-mixing ensures that there aren't any egg white globs, for lack of better terms on my part. So that just makes them completely smooth and completely mixed. And I prefer when I cook scrambled eggs to have them completely mixed so that way there's no globs dripping off the whisk when I'm done, just because I think it makes for fluffier eggs. And then always double Ziploc them. And I also like the technique of pre-mixing them because if you need to freeze them, then they freeze perfectly and in a flat shape. I have personally never tried freezing the egg yolks with them being whole and cracked. Has anybody tried that?
It's a disaster. Don't ever try it. Don't ever freeze the whole unmixed egg yolks. It's a nightmare.
So there is the answer right there. That is probably the number one reason why I would always mix them ahead of time. If I do crack eggs and mix them and I'm not planning to use them the following day, I do freeze them. And that's just my personal preference because I get very grossed out about the thought of pre-mixed eggs that were out in the open air like that and then Ziplocked. So I would say if it's not going to be used within 1 to 2 days, just go ahead and freeze it. They defrost very quickly and very easily, and the texture is still the same if they're already pre-mixed.
I have another technique for eggs, and this is just the cracking technique. If you've never been 36 eggs into cracking eggs and then cracked one and it was full of blood and most of it chicken, that has definitely happened to me. And the problem is if you're cracking 30 some eggs into the same bowl, like you're just cracking them and throwing them into the bowl, that chicken and all that blood will end up in your 30 eggs bowl. And that ruins the bowl. So when I'm cracking eggs, I have a separate bowl on the side. I crack the eggs into that bowl first, and then I dump them into the main bowl with all the eggs. So that way, if I crack one and it's full of a chicken and a bunch of blood, it maybe ruins 3 yolks that are in the smaller bowl before I add them to the bigger one, and it doesn't ruin 30 some eggs.
That's just added protein, Shawn.
Adds that crunchy. You need the crunchy, right?
Really quick from YouTube, Airman Newcase said, food density depends on how many packs. If the packs is the same size as serving bottles, there's no need to put them into small containers. I think you're talking about the salad dressings that we just said, but we actually don't pour it on the salads themselves. So that's to give everybody their individual dressing to pour on as they see fit. If I'm not answering your question, just rewrite it in there.
Yes, Sergeant Hartel, that was a very good point about the eggs. So at home, if I crack an egg, this may be gross, but if I crack an egg and there's like a little blood spot in it, if I can't spoon it out, then I just mix it in and do it. But I do not recommend doing that for missions or anything that you're serving passengers. So cracking it into a separate bowl and then pouring it into your main bowl is a great idea.
Yes. And then if you're going to season them, or whatever, don't, wait until you're cooking them. Don't throw pepper into your pre-mixed eggs and then cook them with the pepper inside. It'll make your eggs look gray.
Yes, I have actually made that mistake of seasoning it ahead of time like that. And then I also ended up with clumps of pepper that I could not break up to mix the eggs. So that's really it for eggs. My number one push will always be if you're going to crack eggs ahead of time, just take that one extra step of cracking them into the KitchenAid and having that mix it. So that way that's one less step you have to do on the jet. So next is pasta prepping. And luckily I was in the kitchen when they were prepping for a mission this week. So I got some good pictures of it and also some tips from Sergeant Rice about it. So always boil the noodles al dente. If you overboil them, they'll basically turn to mush in the Ziploc bag. Or if that doesn't happen, when you go to reheat them or to remix them after you store them in the Ziploc bag, they will also be mush there. So if you are going to store them in a Ziploc bag, first drizzle a little bit of olive oil into the Ziploc, add the drained pasta to the bag, and then drizzle with a little more olive oil. This prevents the noodles from sticking together, and it also prevents them from sticking to the bag. And then using olive oil, because it's kind of more of a neutral flavor and also healthier than vegetable oil, will not really affect the flavor of it too much. And then always double Ziploc like we covered earlier. If possible, you can also save some of the pasta water to take with you. You can dump out a new water bottle and then fill the water bottle with the pasta sauce that way, or with the pasta water that way. You can put it into those sauce bottles that I think we may have in the kitchen and just make sure it's sealed. But it kind of helps the pasta sauce bind to the noodle. Or if you're doing a white pasta, I don't know exactly what it does with the white sauce, but it's supposed to be better. So you can always do that. And it's the same if you are making mashed potatoes from scratch. Sergeant Mears was actually doing that while I was in the kitchen watching or taking pictures of the pasta. And she said that she likes to also take some of the potato water from the potatoes that she boiled with her. And then when she goes to reheat and remix the potatoes, she'll pour a little bit of that pasta water into it, and it really helps the texture. Has anybody else ever tried that?
No. I have kind of an interesting technique for reheating pasta.
We would love to hear it.
So the water that comes out of our faucets on the jet is like safety wired to 178 degrees. And we all know, if you've gotten some burns from the faucet before, that it's hot. So in the past, for reheating pasta in Ziploc bags like this, I've placed my Ziplocs in a clean sink, lined them up next to one another, filled the bag with the scalding hot water, and then clipped the bottom corner of the bag, and the hot water drains away from the pasta, but it leaves the pasta 178 degrees, which is more than hot enough to eat. So it's been a way that I've done large amounts of pasta like that without breaking out, without using up my oven space, or without using up my my bean pot space to reheat pasta, or microwave if I don't have a microwave or whatever. That water is hot enough to heat pasta. So, for what it's worth.
That's a really good technique. I've never heard of doing that before. One other thing you can do too is if you have the pre-made pastas, so say you have a vegan and they're having a spinach and ricotta filled ravioli, you can use your coffee pot water or your sink water and just put it in a pan and let it sit for a little bit. That way you don't have to pull out a bean pot just to boil 6 raviolis.
Oh, that's awesome. Coffee pot water. That's a good idea.
Okay. Next will be fruit prepping, and luckily the crew was also prepping some fruit while I was in the kitchen. So cutting fruit on the day of prep can save a lot of time and mess on the jet, especially pineapple. I think pineapple, for me personally, is probably one of the hardest fruits to cut on the jet, just because it gets juice everywhere and then everything gets sticky. But if you're going to cut melons, I suggest first cutting the melon in half and then using a spoon to gently scoop out the seeds. You can use a knife, but I think a spoon is faster than that. And then I kind of showed a picture of these two comparisons. So I think that's a honeydew on the left was cut out using a knife. So he had quartered it and then cut the seeds out. And so there's quite a few ridges in there just because it was an uneven cut. And then the second one, I had him cut it into quarters and then use a spoon to scoop the seeds out. Well, he'd already cut it into quarters, but then he used a spoon to scoop the seeds out. And so that was just a lot more smooth. It's very, very simple and a very minor thing, but it also does make the fruit look better once you've cut it. And then fruit prepping for fruit bowls ahead of time, you can remove the stickers and also rinse your apples or pears or anything like that you have. I don't suggest ever rinsing your grapes ahead of time unless you're going to shine each individual one to make sure there's no water spots or those white spots that end up on it. So if you have the time and you have enough people in the kitchen and you want to go that as far as to doing that, I'd suggest doing just your leg one fruit at that time.
Also, to add for pineapples or anything really, it makes a huge difference having the right tool for the job, right? So we have, at least I'm pretty certain we still have the pineapple slicers in the kitchen, in the tools area. If you're taking a pineapple on the road, grab one of those and throw it in your kit to use for that purpose. Or if you're taking strawberries, we don't have these in the kitchen, but I think we're getting them, or maybe we should. Those strawberry slicers, they're much thicker blades than an egg slicer, right? And if I'm doing parfaits or anything, I'll make sure that I have my own and I bring it. But the right tool for the job makes all the difference. And if you can think ahead of time, cutting that pineapple on the jet is so much easier with the pineapple slicer than it is just with a knife.
Yes, that is very true. I personally do have a pineapple slicer cutter at home that I use all the time, and I've brought it into the kitchen before to use as well, but it does make a world of difference. And I haven't committed to getting a strawberry slicer yet, but I think Sergeant Flores is definitely on top of getting all of that stuff into the kitchen, so that's great. If anybody has any ideas for other cool like little kitchen gadgets like that don't really take up a lot of space, don't be afraid to suggest them, because anything that makes our lives easier is definitely worth the small cost of it. So the next quite a few slides are going to be very picture heavy. I won't talk too much to most of the food. I'll kind of just let you guys look, and then we won't spend too much time on the slides if I don't really have anything to say, or if people don't have any comments to make out of it or to make about it. So we'll start with this one, prepping with layers. This is a very important one. If you are serving a quesadilla or something, which is one of the meals that we make very, very frequently, when prepping them, make sure that you have an equal amount of chicken and pepper and cheese spread throughout. If someone were to open up that quesadilla, they should not just see 3 random pieces of chicken and like 6 scraggly little peppers. It should be completely uniform throughout with your toppings. Of course, don't overfill it, but make sure that it is uniform throughout. And the same goes for anything that you're making, whether it be a breakfast quesadilla, the chicken quesadillas, wraps, sandwiches, any of that. One more thing about the chicken quesadillas, a good tip is you can use taco seasoning and add that to all of the ingredients prior to putting it onto the tortilla. It kind of just gives it more flavor. And I like to use like actual pre-mixed taco seasoning, just so that way I'm not having to eyeball and guess how much of each random seasonings I want to season my food with. So basically a good rule of thumb is you should have a bite of every ingredient to include the mayo mustard in every single bite that you take. You can also use, for quesadillas, you can use cheese around the edges to kind of seal it closed. For sandwiches, whenever I'm doing like condiments, I'll do like mustard around the outer edge and then through the center. And then that ensures that you just have a bite or the condiment in every single bite. So next are a couple of plating techniques, and there's going to be quite a few slides on this. So the first couple slides are stacking your foods. Don't always think that you have to have your food set up like a clock around your plate. A lot of these, I personally have not been to the Da Vinci culinary training yet. I go in a couple weeks and I'm very excited about that. Some of these pictures that will be in the next slides are from culinary training, but I tried to pull out most of ones that were actually served on the jet, because a lot of what is typically taught at culinary, you can't really do on the jet. So thank you to Sergeant Schmakas for reaching out to flight attendants from other squadrons and gathering a bunch of these pictures. So just as you look at these, kind of envision what we serve from the QMI and how you can plate it to kind of elevate it, because a lot of these have been served on the jet and they look like they came from a 5-star restaurant. And then for this one, so if you're doing a wrap, I'm a big fan of like slicing it diagonal and stacking them and then putting your chips or whatever in the middle. But you can also slice your wraps kind of like sushi rolls. And then also when you are coming up with ideas for wraps or you're able to substitute your ingredients, make sure that you are envisioning what the wrap is going to look like when it's open, because that's the first thing that they're going to see. And then the picture on the far right, it's a beautiful plate. I love the dessert on that. But my personal thing is I wouldn't serve a piece of meat that large on such a small plate. I think if the meat were a little bit smaller, that plate would be absolutely perfect. And then the big debate that I hear a lot among flight attendants is if you're serving like a lasagna or a baked ziti or something like that, do you guys serve vegetables with it if you're also doing a side salad?
I have, yeah. I mean, for years that was kind of like what we did. I think it's, yeah. Yeah, I've done like a broccoli or something, and then there was in fact a side salad on the tray.
I've done that as well. But
I'm a huge fan of that. So I am not a fan of serving a dinner roll with a dinner if you have like a baked potato or something like that. But if I'm doing pasta, I do like to have a vegetable on the plate with it as well, even if there's a salad. But that's all technique and preference.
look at that pineapple.
Look at that. Is that Korean barbecue? Oh, it looks so good.
Yes,
I'm hungry.
This is one of my favorite slides because of the food on there. So the picture in the upper left are just egg rolls or spring rolls. And I think that's a beautiful way to plate them as an appetizer or a snack. The picture at the bottom, I'm not sure what it is, but it looks delicious. And then I just think the pineapple in the center, that is such a creative way to serve pineapple fried rice. Chicken pineapple fried rice, I think is what it is. And then the picture in the right, I don't know how to say it, but it looks very good as well.
Oh, bimbap or something?
Bibimbap, yeah.
Okay.
And these are all meals that you could definitely do on a C-32 with 40 passengers. They may have a lot of components, but a lot of this stuff is things you can have pre-prepped, and so that way you just have an assembly line and you're building it as you go.
I like how on the one on the bottom left, they cut their green onions on like an extreme bias, like really hard angle.
Yes, I really like that too. I do wish that meal had some other type of vegetable with it. Maybe they serve like edamame on the side or something. But that would be my personal preference with that. Sergeant Tremakis says that going back to the pasta, it depends on what the party wants. You could complement it with a cold salad or a bold flavor like a cucumber dill salad. That's also a very good idea. And then Snuke says all pasta deserves garlic bread. I agree with that as well.
Agreed.
So this next one, kind of just various things. I love that someone serves steak and lobster on the jet. And I think that's a beautiful way to plate it as well. And then the upper left is an truffle fettuccine. And then the center one is, I think that one, Sergeant Marcus, correct me if I'm wrong, pork tenderloin with turmeric quinoa, I think. And then I think the picture on the left, I'm wondering if that may have been from Andrews or something like that, because it looks similar to what we do. And then another one of my favorites from the pictures we got is that pad thai with the mango sticky rice. That is an absolutely amazing looking plate, and it looks like it tastes so good.
Yeah, those plates are really interesting.
The mango could be very time consuming. I'm not sure I would want to slice that many mangoes for 40 passengers, but you could always come up with something else to kind of garnish that plate with. And this next one are just various salad examples that we got sent in. So we do serve a lot of salads on the jet. And also, one thing I do want to note is a lot of these are from different units and different squadrons. So the tools that they have and the dishes that they have are different. So we may not be able to make food that looks like this or plated like this because we don't have those dishes to do so on the aircraft. So that is another thing to factor in when you're thinking of plating. What dishes can you actually use to make a specific meal? And those are things to think about when the party chooses something from the QMI. Like, okay, I want to plate it this way, but what do I have on the jet or in the squadron that I can take with me to make it look this way? I love the salmon salad on this one. And then the ahi tuna salad, the comments from the flight attendants that sent that said that it was a delicious salad and also so easy. But this is just another thing. You can get really creative with your salads as far as the presentation and the flavors go, and it won't be too time consuming to prep for too many people.
Yeah, they slayed that tuna salad. That looks great. I like what they did in the upper left with the lime. How they use the zester to make a cool thing down the line. It's kind of cool.
Yeah, I thought that was really creative. And I also like how they did that kind of drizzle with the sauce. And then same with the other taco salad bowl on the bottom. They kind of put some type of sauce around it. So the plate didn't look so bare, but it also doesn't look messy. And I really liked how they used the tortillas as the bowl for the taco salad.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's a nice touch.
Okay, so next we're on to breakfast. So I am a huge fan of having a balanced breakfast. I don't think there is anything wrong with serving vegetables with your breakfast. In fact, I think you should have more vegetables with breakfast. So when given the opportunity to kind of build your own breakfast, say you're on an OST or whatever other situation you may be able to come up with your own meals, make sure that you are kind of trying new things and branching out with that. And then also make sure you have a good balance of proteins, carbs, and fats if you're able to make substitutions for things. So example, add more veggies. You can add mixed greens with a citrus vinaigrette or fruit. Even if you've added it to a Greek yogurt parfait, you can still have like a couple orange slices or something on the plate, as opposed to adding more carbs or starches to it. So if you need something else on that plate, don't always resort to a bagel or toast or potatoes. Kind of think outside the box a bit and think of other things that you can do to make the meal a little bit healthier. One thing to consider is that the majority of the snacks we have on the jet are not very nutritious snacks. So they're giving people energy, but not to last them very long. And when people are sitting on the plane for hours on end and then they're going to go work, they need to be fed nutritious foods. So that's one thing to consider when you're able to make substitutions to meals, or when you're like what oils you're using with food and how much butter you're adding to things. Like these are all things to keep in mind, that your job is to serve, well, it's not your primary job, of course, but when we're doing food, to serve an appealing and appetizing meal, but also kind of try to be more health conscious about it.
Is that a feta salad next to the breakfast up in the left?
I think it's goat cheese.
Goat cheese.
Yes.
I would have never thought to have paired that with the breakfast, but
yep.
And then a technique that I use, I see that the tater tots up there. When hash browns are called for, I always grab tater tots, and then I cook the tater tots and I mix them into hash browns. That's just a technique that I use because tater tots get crispy. And every time I've done hash browns on the jet, I use the actual hash brown frozen bags of hash browns or whatever. I'm never happy with how they come out. They like part of them, they don't seem to come out crispy enough. They come out more soggy than anything. And I really like when I use the tater tots instead and then turn them into hash browns. I'm usually a lot happier with how it goes. Does anyone have techniques for? I see that there's eggs Benedict on here, and I've done eggs Benedict on the jet before, and then I promptly after that said I'd never do it again. Does anyone have?
Yep, I did it once, so I'd love another technique.
Does anyone have a swift technique for eggs, for poaching eggs on the jet?
I like to use the bean pot, or at Hickam I don't know if it was kind of like a deep fryer. I know we have a couple in the kitchen. I think it's called a multi-cooker. So it's like a bean pot, but it's more in the shape of an actual pot. So like something you would cook soup in, boil your pasta or something like that. So I like to use that one because it has a taller edge. But basically I just pour my vinegar in there, whisk it really quick, and then I'll use like a 1/4 cup measuring cup, crack the egg into that, and then slowly pour that in. Or I'll use like a regular spoon and crack the egg into the spoon and pour it in like that. Also, you can, if you're going to serve it the next day or something, you can poach your eggs ahead of time. And then if you layer your paper towels into a pan and then put some like wax paper or parchment paper, not parchment paper, wax paper or plastic wrap, you can gently put your eggs on top of that as well. You just have to be very careful about scooping them out and making sure that you don't crack the yolk.
If you're poaching egg just for the DV, there is like a plasticware that you can put in the microwave to poach the eggs. But I've done it at home I haven't tried it in our nuclear microwave at the jet though. So, but yeah, it's available if you're just doing 1C, 2C.
And for those that don't know, the microwave, you can set the power level. I mean, I'm sure we all know that. You can set the power level on the microwave, but if you set it to 70% of its power, you can generally use normal microwave times that are listed on boxes and things. It turns it from a nuclear microwave into a normal microwave, taking some of the guesswork out of it. I did some extensive testing with that on seeing what turned it into a normal microwave. So 70% of power, you can use the times that are listed on a box or something.
That's good to know.
Yeah.
And then I'll say, so the plate on the left, I actually did that one, and it was it was my evaluator's plate at the very end, actually. But I think that's a bad example of plating. There's a lack of color and nutrient foods on the plate. She was keto, so she wanted extra sausage. Otherwise, I was only doing the 2 sausage rounds for everyone else. And then it was a bruschetta toast, and that one had gotten soggy. So if you are doing bruschetta toast, I do not suggest drizzling it with the balsamic ahead of time.
You gave it to your evaluator?
Yeah, it was fine. I will say all of the other plates looked great. Like you could see the colors of the tomato and the basil. Like the other ones were really pretty. I didn't get pictures of those ones. But this one is a bad example, and I wanted to share that too, just so you can see like those colors are not appealing colors, and that kind of comes down to how it was prepared and how I served it. Snuke left a couple comments saying, think outside the box, think whole foods, plant-based. So yeah, sometimes you do need more proteins outside of plant-based foods, which a lot of breakfasts will have a breakfast meat with it. But you can also, don't be afraid to add your plants and stuff on top of it. And then also for hash browns, maybe try using a waffle maker. That's a really good idea. I have seen like hash brown patties that look like miniature waffles and kind of like little haystacks. So that kind of goes into what Sergeant Hartel was saying about mixing regular hash brown or tater tots into hash browns. I will say I don't like the look of regular tater tots on a plate. I feel like they kind of just fall flat and can roll all over the place. So I do like to do like haystacks of hash browns. Next is yogurt parfait ideas. So I love yogurt parfaits because you can get really creative with it. You can add any type of fruit, any type of granola. You can use chia seeds. You can add oats to it. And also, you can use it for a dessert, or you can use it for a breakfast or a snack idea or anything like that. So one thing to be cautious of when doing parfaits, especially if it's for breakfast, if you're going with a flavored yogurt, you don't want your parfait to be too sweet. A lot of flavored regular yogurts have a lot of sugar added to them, and then that on top of sweetened granola and honey and fruit is almost too sweet for some people to eat. My preference is to use a plain Greek yogurt, and then I sweeten it with either fresh or frozen fruit, granola, and then drizzles of honey in every layer. I think my favorite one on this one is the chia parfait. Oh, also, if you're using frozen fruit, I like to chop it ahead of time, like right after we purchase it, so that way it's easy to cut, and then I'll Ziploc it, so that way it's already cut up to be used in the parfaits, and then it thaws faster as well.
Little tip on for the granola: if you're planning to put fruit in them, like blueberries, and you're probably serving it on the 8th day or something like that. I've done it in the past. Like I bought some granola that has some dried fruits in them. I know it's not fresh, but there's a little bit of fruits in them instead of like nothing at all.
That's a really good idea too, and I think it gives it another kind of type of flavor when it has the dried fruits in it. So dessert ideas, there's quite a few slides on this, and I love doing desserts because you can basically do anything you want with it. So for pies and cakes, consider serving it deconstructed. So instead of just doing a normal slice of cheesecake, you can do rough chops of it and kind of build a parfait out of it, or spread it across a plate and add berries to it. I didn't eat blackberries for the longest time because I just assumed they were gross, but seeing them cut in half is actually, they're really pretty on the inside. So they kind of add another dimension of color to it. If given the opportunity to pick a dessert for a meal, don't just resort to the normal Pepperidge Farm cookies or something like that. Kind of try to get out of your comfort zone and try something new with it. And if serving a brownie, instead of topping it, or instead of just doing it plain or just doing powdered sugar across from it, try like whipped cream or some type of fruit syrup across it, or hot fudge. And then also you can do it on the plate instead of on the dessert. And there's going to be quite a few examples that kind of demonstrate that.
Macaroons, delicious.
Yes, so these are some of my favorite desserts. I think the picture in the upper left, I don't think we really have the ability to serve both of those at once, and I think that's a lot of desserts. I don't know if the intention behind it was like just showing two separate desserts, but I think each on their own would be very appealing and just enough as well. I like that I think it's cheesecake, that they're little servings and that they're cut into 4 individual pieces instead of one big one. I personally would feel like more satiated after eating 4 little ones like that than just eating one big one at once.
How did they
Cheesecake bites like that already.
How did they do the plate painting? Does anyone know on that upper left one where it's the blob, but then it has the cut in the middle? Did they just
the
dollop
spooning.
it and drag a spoon through it?
Yep,
Yep.
exactly.
This one
And they
is
learned that at culinary too.
Yeah, this one is from Sergeant Mackey. So if she is not super busy at the sock desk right now and can say anything in the comments, she might be able to explain exactly how she did that.
It's pretty cool. I like it.
And I do want to say, so like the macaroons, I don't think that those are on the QMI, but if for any reason you ever had a party that requested those or something, and you were going somewhere that had a really nice bakery or something like that, you can always pick up desserts like that in places that you go. I know Japan has amazing desserts. So given the opportunity to buy one there as opposed to the commissary, I would definitely go for it. I do like how they did the fruit tart at the bottom. You can buy a fruit tart from basically any grocery store bakery, and then they really dressed it up with that drizzle across the plate.
Yeah, if you're gonna do the dusting that they've done down on the left with the fork, and you're the middle or whatever responsible for the dusting, just throw down some aluminum foil all over your area, and then that'll really help you with the cleanup.
That's a good point. Okay, so we'll kind of just skip through some of the next ones, and you guys can just look at them and see how pretty they are and how simple some of them are as well.
Really quick. So you were saying, if you're overseas somewhere and they didn't request it, to pick it up. Just a reminder to all the flight attendants, make sure with the contact that is okay. Because sometimes they don't want to pay for those types of things. So just verify with the contact.
That's true, because sometimes they can be expensive. So this last one, I wanted to put on there. The little mousse cups are very cute, and we can make those on the jet. And mousse is pretty easy to make. You can make it as simple or as extravagant as you want, but an easy way is just to use heavy whipping cream, heat it, and then you mix in the melted chocolate with it, and then you let it refrigerate. Fruit is always an easy and healthy dessert, and you can dress it up like the plate in the center on the bottom. Fruit is still a dessert. And then the one on the left is just another variation of a tart. And then making chocolate molds like the picture on the right is super easy. You can just melt your chocolate, add a little bit of coconut oil to it, drizzle your mold, and then refrigerate it, and then store them, and then you can add them to whatever dessert you want. They just have to be kept completely cold.
So I will say with the chocolate mousse, I've went as far as like on the jet, separating the egg whites and whipping one to soft peaks, whipping one to hard peaks, and like totally from scratch chocolate mousse. And I was proud of myself for being able to do that. But then the next flight I went on, I did the box stuff, and I realized that I wasted my time making chocolate mousse from scratch. It tasted the same to me, but maybe I have really dull taste buds.
I will say I've never made it from scratch. I also haven't used the box, but I've used just like some simple recipes off of Pinterest, like easy mousse, and they taste really good to me as well. But
right.
Okay, so now we are moving away from food, and we'll kind of wrap it up with some on the jet ideas of things that tips you can use and tricks to use. So you can actually fit your trays into the bins on the C40. That's good if you bake your cookies and you need them to cool still, and you have room in a bin, and you just have them lined out on a tray or in a pan on the tray, and then you slide it in there. If you're middle and you souffled your stuff ahead of time, you can also, and then you don't want to put it in your tray cart, you can put it in the bins and slide those in. Basically anything that you can put in there that isn't going to create a mess, you can store in there. And then next one, it is one of my biggest pet peeves when I get on the jet in the middle section and those cabinets are a complete mess. So just think of ways that you can make fleet as organized as possible to make it as easy as possible for you. There's nothing worse than one of the pilots goes to open the cabinet to grab a Ziploc bag and everything falls out at you. So just keep in mind that you want your area to be organized, neat, and clean. And then going back to the sauces, Nuke helped us out. He said the consistency of the sauce helps a lot. If they're thick enough, you can just doll it up on there and drag it by a spoon. So these are gum, chocolate, mint tray ideas. I just did this in the squadron this week, so I kind of just made do with what resources I did have. I know a lot of times people will only hand out gum and mints. I also like to just add chocolates to the tray as well. And so instead of just dumping it all together, you can kind of do different variations of it. For the last picture on the right, I had actually built another one with the chocolates in the bowl and then the gum and mints around it. And then I got distracted talking to someone in the kitchen and I did not take a picture of it. So I just added on there vice versa with the chocolates in the bowl and then the gum and mints around it. And then also imagine that those paper towels are a blue cloth napkin over. For that one, I used just the metal fruit bowls that we use for fruit bowls. And then it would be a blue cloth napkin, but I improvised with paper towels. So just kind of try to make that's really the last treat that they're getting on that leg of the flight. So you want to make it presentable to them. Okay, so next we are going to just cover a little bit on the jet food prep techniques. So there are very few here, and if anybody has any that they want to share, feel free to share those as well. So for cook, a good technique is to line your area with foil anytime you're about to start prepping. This just makes for really easy cleanup. I personally like to, if I'm not lining it with foil, which I almost always do unless I'm short on it or I just don't want to take the time to do that, I always clean it ahead of time and then put everything on there. But I think foil just makes it so much easier. So you just lay your foil out, and then when you're done, you just jumble all your foil together, sanitize it, and you don't have to scrub anything off of the bridge or anything like that. When making quesadillas fresh on the jet and even sandwiches or paninis, Sergeant Wilson had a great tip for this. So first, cover your area with foil, lay out as many tortillas as you can fit, and then layer your ingredients on in an assembly line. So all tortillas get cheese, all tortillas get meat, all tortillas get peppers, and then you just continue that. And then fold them in half and then add another layer of tortillas on top of it, and then continue that process until they're all complete. Once you're ready to start cooking them, you can fit 4 at a time on there. And then as soon as you take those off, rotate the 4 new ones. So anytime you're building stuff like that, it should always be kind of like an assembly line process. So you take your 4 off and you put it in a pan, and you can store them in the oven. You're not ready to start plating, and then you just keep doing that. You can also start cooking them in batches of 4 while you're still building. So say you have like 8 ready to go, you can start cooking those, and as those are cooking, just start building more. That way you're having some being cooked as they're being built. Don't be scared to ask others how they rotate their food and setup and prep area. They may have some great ideas that will make life easier for everyone. One thing that someone taught me on the C-32 was they will take their plates and bowl bins and stick them into the tray cart on the side of the cook. That way they're not having to ask the middle to rotate plates with them, and then it's not taking up counter space or anything like that. You just reach into the tray cart and you pull out your plates when you need them. And then same when you're drying dishes, it made it a lot easier to just dry your dishes and slide them in there. Try your food, and if you absolutely don't want to, because I admit I really don't like to try a lot of the food that I cook on the jet, have at least 2 other people try it. And I suggest having 2 other people try it rather than just one, because that one person's taste buds may be completely different than someone else's. So if you have 2 people taste it and the consensus is that it's good, then keep going with it. It's also better to under-season your food and have someone try it and then tell you you need to add more to it than it is to over-season where you can't take it away. This is another great tip from Sergeant Wilson. When you're slicing tomatoes, to put on anything, whether it's on a sandwich, a wrap, maybe even in your side salads, sprinkle it with some salt and pepper. It elevates the flavor of anything that you're adding it to. So a couple position specific tips for on the jet. I'll wait for the slide to go on YouTube. So bar and bags, this was a good tip from Sergeant Webb. When pouring drinks, put the cup of soda next to the can. So whoever's picking it up knows what it is without you having to tell them, this is your Coke, this is your Dr. Pepper, this is your Sprite, your sparkling water. If you have the can right next to the cup, they should be able to tell as they're picking it up. You can also set them out in the order that the aisle has written them down. So say they wrote on a little sheet that they have a Coke on the right-hand side, by the window, and then a Sprite right next to it in the aisle. You can set them up on the counter in that order so they can grab them that way as well. This was a great tip from Sergeant Tramakas for when all the flight attendants are securing the cabin. You can do a top-down technique. So you start by looking at the top, so at the overhead bins to ensure that they're closed, and then you move down. So you'll check to see if their seat is upright, tray table stowed, seatbelt is fastened, all electronics are put away, and then you're moving to the bottom by making sure bags are secured and not by their feet. And then you can also do it left row to right row, and then move forward or move backward as to one. So that way, instead of people are doing multiple trips down the aisle, or instead of looking here and then going back to look there, you kind of just get it all done at once. Also, secure with a smile. Someone is going to be far more likely to put that laptop away if you ask them nicely with a smile on your face than if you just stand there and say, sir, please put your laptop away. So anytime you're asking people to secure things, always just say it nicely.
So something that I like to do, and I've taught a few students this, is yes, using that top-down technique, but so that I never have to really look above eye level, I always walk down the aisle and have both my hands out, just kind of grazing the overhead bins.
That's also just a good technique for, doing that you do that all the time. I do that as well, and it has saved me in sudden turbulence.
That is a really good technique because it may look like it is closed, but it could partially be open too. So if you're running your hand along it, you're able to feel that it's uneven and it's not closed all the way. It's a good idea. So next, when picking up trash, don't ever greet the DV to pick up their trash with any items on the tray. So for the C-32, I suggest collecting the DV trash, or if the first is doing it, then you don't really have to worry about that. Dump it in the middle section and then continue through the rest of the aircraft. For the C-40, I suggest always starting in the DV cabin and then working your way forward. You never want to go back to the DV and pick up his trash with a tray full of water bottles, gum wrappers, empty chip bags, and so on. But you also don't want to do the rest of the cab or do the front half of the cabin first and then have to walk back through to dump your tray and then walk back through again to get to the DV. Because I guarantee there's going to be a couple people that didn't hand you trash for whatever reason during your first trip. So at that point, they're probably going to try to hand you trash again then as well. And then one thing I have encountered is as I'm walking back to the DV with my tray to pick up trash, people try to hand me trash and I just kindly say, oh, I'll be right back up to pick that up. That way they know I'm not ignoring them. They know I'll still pick up their trash, but then they also know that the DV is my priority to get his trash first. Same thing when handing out hot cold towels. So C-32, of course, start with the DV and then work your way back. C-40, I like to have 2 people in the back. So one that has a tray of hot cold towels and then someone that has an empty tray. This will also help with the securing the jet call if you just always have your 2 people back there. But once the DV members are somewhat settled, start with the DV and then work your way forward to hand out towels. The other FA that's back there, if passengers need help putting their bags away, they can put their empty tray down and go assist with the bags. And then as you've already handed out your towels, they walk behind you and pick up the trash. of the towels. And of course, they're starting with the DV and then working their way forward as well.
And then with that, just give it a few seconds. Like don't stand directly behind them and they feel, rushed to just quickly rinse off or whatever. But just give it a few seconds and then walk behind to pick up the towels.
Yes, I always hang out in the back and also don't bombard them while they're still trying to put things away. But if you see that there's only a few stragglers that are still like meandering around, don't feel like you have to wait for everyone to be completely sat down either. Just don't be in the way, but also don't wait until everyone is sat down because they'll take forever if they can. And always remember to do everything with a kind face. If you're walking down the aisle and even if you aren't interacting with a passenger to give them a drink or take a snack order or something like that, smile at random passengers if they look at you or make eye contact with you as you're walking down the aisle. You just want it to be a friendly atmosphere. If you walk down the aisle and even though you are just really trying to get to that back galley or the front galley or something, and you look determined, that you just don't look like someone that they would really want to approach in that sense. So just always try to look happy no matter how bad of a mood you're in.
I know personally, there are flight attendants out there that will put on that determined face specifically so that they don't get bothered by a passenger, and that is not the right frame of mindset to be in.
It is not. It is not. You should always, no matter how bad one of those passengers irritates you or something, or you know exactly what they're going to be asking, just always greet them with a smile. And that's another thing too. I saw on a corporate flight attendant's Instagram page, it was you want to anticipate your user's needs. So if you have the same lady who always orders that sparkling water, and you know that's what she's going to want, and you know as soon as she stops you in that aisle, then that's what she's going to ask. You already know what she wants, so just be receptive to it and be friendly about it. Having a mean-looking face on as you're walking down the aisle so passengers don't approach you is not the right mindset to have.
Thanks for calling me out, Shawn.
Sergeant Torres did have a quick question for prepping the cabin packs for landing. Can we prep them ahead of time using the PA like they do in commercial flights? They can help the packs get in the mindset of landing. I do know the double ding is our cue to do that. And a lot of times if they're still in a meeting or on the phone, the PA will, get in the way of that. But Sergeant Hertel or Sergeant Fitzgerald, do you guys have any other ideas on if that's something that is allowed or could be done?
So I've done that at another base, and personally, I've always been a fan of it, but things are different here. Sergeant Fitzgerald, why don't you weigh in on this one?
Oh, I think she may have gotten knocked out. 1 second.
So when I went to the FMRC this year, we did add in the briefings to the manuals. So they should be in there to assist if you do at some point need to utilize the PA.
I've always been I've been a fan of it. I know that the cons of it are it's less personal, right? That it's less, slightly more clinical, that it comes over a PA instead of someone personally there and saying, ladies and gentlemen, we're getting ready for landing, right? And so it's slightly more one step removed. But I've been a fan of it because it does get everyone in the right mindset. It does make securing go smoother. And then it's not a surprise when you show up over someone's shoulder, or at least it shouldn't be. But you make a good point about the ongoing meetings. And I'm not sure if someone is in a meeting, the PA should not interrupt into their audio stream at all. But if they're on, microphone, it would. So.
You guys are saying prior to takeoff to do that? Sorry, I missed it.
Oh, yeah. So the question with Sergeant Torres was asking for prepping the cabin and packs for landing. Could we prep them ahead of time using the PA, similar to like commercial flights?
So we had that as a project. I don't know what ended up happening with it, but that was a project that some folks at EC were like, Sergeant Ramirez was heading that up for a while. And then I don't know what kind of happened with it. So I'm sure it's another project that someone could pick up the football with again to see, like, can we actually do that?
Oh, you're talking about the video.
Yeah, I mean it's the same thing, kind of, sort of, but
My opinion on it is, until we have an actual script, like what Sergeant Wall was talking about for the briefings, I feel like it may be not tacky, but I personally would not do that unless we all had the same script that we were using, just because someone's tone of voice, it may come off as rude, and then the DV is also hearing that PA announcement. So if that were to be the situation, because it's all about tone of voice, and some people just have like my tone of voice sometimes. Well, actually, my tone of voice most of the time doesn't sound super friendly. So it could come off the wrong way as well in that sense too, if we don't have specific terminology that we're using to do it. And then Sergeant Flores, did you want to say something?
Oh, this is more building the meals and stuff. Just additional ideas, but yeah.
Okay. And then Sergeant Dixon made a great point on YouTube. Smile even when you're wearing your mask. They can see it in your eyes. That's very true. As you're standing in the back or in the front, wherever you're at, and passengers are getting on board, even if you have your mask on, still smile. It really does come off in your demeanor as far as how you're standing, how your posture is. If you just look super grumpy under that mask, I'm sure that body language is being portrayed in another part of your posture and stance as well.
Awesome. Well, great job on that. I'll wait to see if there's any more questions really quick, but we did appreciate everybody sticking in there. We did go over our 1 hour time, but this was great information that we wanted to get passed out to everyone. And we will get this slideshow uploaded into our continuation slides on the box so that you guys can have all those. So if you missed the continuation training, you can go back through and review all those slideshows. I do have to say uploaded now. Let's see, there's a lot more questions coming in. Let's see, also, have we thought of numbering the seats helps to relay PAX information from FA to FA? And let's see. Oh, for taking drink orders, get distracted when you have to tell someone the lady in general seating aircraft right in the aisle got a Coke. Are they no longer numbered in there, Sergeant Wall, in our manuals? The seat chart.
I'm sorry, what was that?
Are they no longer numbered in the seat chart? The seats in our manual.
You've got a lot of feedback. Something you're.
Oh, it's somebody's. Where's my mind? Yeah, there you go. For the seating, the seat charts, are they no longer in the manual? Do you know if that's been? I'd have to look in there right now, but I know that's where I used to get them.
Yeah, I'm on here right now. Let me check.
Okay. While she's checking that, so we're not taking too much more time. Sergeant Moore says you can also work with the AC to make an announcement for FAs to prepare the cabin early, which is also a great option.
I really like that idea.
Yeah, until we get something more official, like that's also a great option. And I actually do know some ACs that do say prepare the cabin for landing. So
it's short, it's simple, and gets straight to the point, and the entire party hears it.
I have one last thing to add on to the end of this real quick, and that is everybody knows that Sergeant Fitzgerald is back. She's coming into the ops soup seat, and then I'll be leaving to go off to the Inspector General job. And in this meantime, please, if you are sending me communications, please include both of us on that so that we can work together and stay in the loop. So throw Sergeant Fitzgerald on those emails and on those Mattermost communications as well. And that'll help us do an efficient and hopefully seamless turnover.
Awesome. Sergeant Flores, you got something before I turn it over to Sergeant Fitz?
Yeah. I just have like two more tips for training purposes, especially for students. I highly encourage them to sometimes like I draw like what you envision for your tray so you don't forget anything. And if you're like making sandwiches and stuff, and it includes like layers, like I literally draw them so I don't forget any components. That's basically it. And then don't freeze or don't refrigerate your bananas. That's it.
Good suggestion. But yeah, so thank you guys for tuning in. And then if the ops super has anything. If she doesn't, we will wrap it up today. Thank you guys. We're over time, so we won't hold you too much longer.
I don't have anything. I'm just super excited to be back.
Awesome. All right. Thanks, Sam. Thank you guys. We will see you in 2 Thursdays from now.
All right, I have ended the stream.